Or the best Orky shooting is the one that makes the loudest noise, but being able to crump the enemy efficiently is also handy, so let's see which of the guns are the best. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're going quite in depth on the new Ork Codex. We're basically looking at every single shooting unit in the book, and talking about their firepower, damage output, and a few other relevant factors. I thought it'd be interesting to see the most efficient picks when we're targeting infantry, elites, and heavies. So with that in mind, we're going to go through most of the dedicated firepower units in the Codex, and have a look at how they stack up against each other. Just for a brief overview, in the new book, DAKKA weapons were quite a big shake-up. They're the new class of weapon that you can move and shoot with freely. You get a few extra shots if you're within half-inch range, but you don't get to advance and shoot with them. They're not assault weapons. For some weapons like the Looter's DAKKA guns, this is pretty much a straight buff, but to a fair view of the small arms it's a bit of a nerf, particularly to shooter boys, not being able to advance and fire their weapons in clans such as Evil Sons. Most clans could certainly benefit from a bit of shooting, but if you really wanted to build around Orky firepower, the main two choices are either Bad Moons or Freebooters. Bad Moons give you an extra 6 inches to their DAKKA weapons and heavy weapons, extra APs on 6s to wound, and they've got a really nice stratagem on core units where 6s to hit generate an additional hit automatically. For one command point, that one's really powerful. It's essentially a plus 50% boost to the firepower of a unit, which is crazy for that lower cost. Freebooters, I suspect, might be even more competitive. You get +1 to hit if you've killed a unit that phase, which again, usually on an Ork ballistic skill of 5+, will usually be a 50% damage increase to your entire army. It's absolutely awesome when triggered. Just the main downside is that you do actually have to kill an enemy unit for it to go off, and until then you don't get any benefit at all. It ideally means that you want to plink off an injured enemy unit with some token firepower, and then go in for the kill with your really big guns. I'd argue it's probably more powerful, but also harder to use. Finally, as another option, there's the Death Skulls, a decent option on multiple small units with their 1-hit reroll, and they also can use their Wrecker's stratagem for +1 to wound against vehicles. Finally, if you're really going very heavy on the vehicles and bikes, you could think about using Speed War, which is another decent shooting boost. You get an extra AP -1 for 2 turns, more shots on DAKKA weapons, and advance and shoot on any of the remaining assault weapons, some of which are on vehicles. It can be really strong on some units like Warbites and DAKKA jets, though unless you're running Ghazghkull himself, it does mean you'd have to give up on the standard War benefits, the one that gives you +1 attack per model. In any case, let's jump into going through some units, and we'll talk through each one and a bit of their relative damage output. First up, I thought we'd start with the Shooter Boys, 9 points per model now, and 18-inch range on their DAKKA 3-2 shooters. I'd argue that they're still a lot more of a hybrid unit than really a true shooting unit. With 2 attacks each hitting on 3s, it does mean that they'll still do more damage in melee than shooting on average. You can also add some big shooters or rocket launchers into the mix. They're not terrible, but I don't think they're amazingly good value, particularly the rockets, seeing as you'll want to be moving most of the time. I think Shooter Boys will get on quite well with Bad Moons. They get the +6-inch range, which means they could still be in DAKKA range after using Dad Jump or the Teleporter, and a bit of extra AP doesn't hurt either on their low-strength guns. I think they certainly get a bit more out of trucks than standard boys do, and are a bit better when not foot slogging, and you could think about the dedicated Truck Boys upgrade to allow them to get out, get in DAKKA range, shoot and then charge. They also quite like that more DAKKA stratagem, the 2 command point one to allow them to DAKKA at maximum range. For an example squad, maybe using Dead Jump to get in DAKKA range, and then using the Bad Moon stratagem, you'd be looking at around about 13 dead guardsmen, 2 or 3 dead Space Marine intercessors, or around 3 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. Not really going to be doing all that much unless you're firing at light infantry, though hopefully you can follow that down with a charge. Next up, let's look at some of the options for Orky firepower on foot. Tank Busters are 17 points per model, and they attack with their 24-inch heavy D3 rockets. Strength 8, AP -2, damage 3 and blast. Blast means they can be quite good at taking out units of elites as well, and they get a +1 to hit against vehicles. It does mean they'll usually be spitting out quite a lot of high quality shots, though often not very accurately if they do have to move to get in range. Incidentally, I do quite like the Bomb Squig upgrade as well. For 5 points, that seems like quite a reliable trade out for getting some mortal wounds. With the heavy weapons and moving, they'll often like to get the +1 to hit from freebooters if it's going, and the Bad Moon stratagem allowing them extra hits on 6s essentially would give them double damage if the squad does have to move. Trucks or battle wagons I think could be a good choice for them to make them actually a little bit durable, as they're really squishy for 17 points, and their guns aren't the longest range either. If you've got 5 models and they're stationary, you kill around about 4 guardsmen, 2 intercessors, or 7 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. So if the stars align and you can keep them still while not having the squad destroyed before shooting, they are basically one of the most efficient anti-tank sources in the Ork army, kind of what you would expect. Next up, you come to the shock attack gun, 110 points for the model, and gained a 4+ ballistic skill in the new codex as it's a mech. It's got D6 shots, 60-inch range, random strength at 2d6, AP 5 and damage d6, and if you get an 11 or more then you get d3 mortal wounds as well. It means that it really is quite swingy. The shock attack was definitely very sad to lose the full death skull rerolls that they had in the new codex. Rerolling 1 hit, wound and damage was amazing for it. You can upgrade 15 points for an enhanced run sucker, giving you 2d3 shots rather than d6, though I don't think it's really worth it for the extra damage output you get. You only get an extra half a shot, a ballistic skill 4+ on average. I'd say maybe the best thing about the shock attack gun mech is that it can't be targeted directly. You can sit at the back with some vehicles, handing out some repairs to them, and just fire away with the gun to add a bit more damage downrange. Getting the accurate numbers for the damage output is pretty hard on this thing, and I'm afraid beyond what I can be bothered to calculate exactly. If you go with the average strength value though, and take into account the chance of mortal wounds, if you assumed it gets a strength 7, it'd be around 2 guardsmen, 1 or 2 intercessors, or about 3 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. For the points investment, I must admit the numbers aren't exactly stellar. I guess not too bad for being untargetable, but nowhere near as efficient as some squads or vehicles. Next up we come to the Burner Boys, one of the more improved units in the new codex. They're still 11 points a model, but each of their flamers is d6 shots rather than d3, though now you must include spanners in the unit, and they can either take a free big shooter, or pay a 5-point upgrade for either custom mega blasters or rockets. Their cut in flames became a stratagem, so you can get AP -2 if you need it if you charge into combat. Burner Boys all really like trucks or transports for delivery into battle, or maybe Dad Jump or the teleporter, which they're a credible threat with now as they can fire out of deep strike. Their damage output is now really solid against light infantry. For a unit with 10 models and 2 custom mega blaster upgrades, that'd be 120 points, sorry not 130. You'd kill around about 12 guardsmen, just over 3 intercessors, or even do 6 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. Very high damage output, though of course you have to get up close. Moving on, we come to the Flash Skits, 27 points per model now. They get ballistic skill 4+ innately, and the guns are 24-inch range, heavy 3, strength 6, AP -2, and damage 2, likely to be best at killing heavy infantry. They can make good use of Captain Badrock's reroll 1s to hit for a bit more efficiency, and perhaps the main incentive to take them is their 2 command point stratagem to allow them to fire again, though you must target the closest unit the second time you shoot. Makes it a bit hard to calculate their worth as well, as of course they're going to be firing twice as much if you do soup them up with a few CP. If you can get 10 models firing and stationary, you'll kill around about 12 guardsmen, 6 or 7 intercessors, or 7 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. Per 100 points invested though, they are generally only all that good against killing marines. They will be significantly less hard hitting if they do have to move and take the -1 to hit, though it is quite nice to be able to casually double their damage output with an extra 2 CP. Next up we have the Looters, 17 points per model, 48-inch range DAKKA guns that are DAKKA 3-2, which is kind of an improvement on their previous heavy incarnation as they can now be at least a little bit mobile. They're all strength 7, AP -1 and damage 2, and again like the burners, 1 and 5 must be upgraded to a spanner, and again can take a big shooter, custom mega blaster or rocket. With their good range they could be a candidate to go in that new big head boss bunker, but trucks or battle wagons can also keep them nipping around the board and spitting out good generalist firepower. Again, like the tank busters, they do kind of want to be protected as they're really quite expensive models. Theoretically, you could certainly use Dad Jump or the teleporter, that'd get them in DAKKA range pretty reliably, and hopefully throw down some hurt on some enemy models. Damage output wise, this is calculated assuming they're within 24 inches for the DAKKA range, and the mechs taking custom mega blasters. Typically they are just quite general purpose damage output. They'll do okay against hordes, elites or vehicles. It's only really toughness 8 and above or -1 damage units that they really will struggle with. Next up we come to the mech guns, fairly heftily changed in the new decks, though I still think quite strong. You can only take 1 to 3 in the unit now, and they must stay within the same unit, which means with their leadership of 4 you generally just want to take 1 of them, as if 1 dies there's every chance that the next one is just going to run away. The custom mega cannon I think is my favourite. You get D6 strength 8 AP -3 shots with D6 damage, and to me, seeing as it costs the same as the others now, it does seem just flatly superior. I genuinely wonder whether they meant to make it cost a little bit more, and they just managed to leave that out of the points cost section. In general, I don't think they really need to bother with all that many combos, they just want to sit there and act fairly independently, though I suppose a mech could repair them. And say we had a couple of individual custom mega cannons for 90 points, they'd kill around about 3 or 4 guardsmen, 2 or 3 intercessors, or about 7 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. For the range, durability and flexibility, a few mech guns do seem like a really efficient choice, and in particular they are one of the most efficient anti-armor weapons in the Codex, dealing very good damage to vehicles for their investment. Moving into flyers now, and we come to the DAKKA jet, another really quite improved model in my opinion. You don't get the +1 to hit for all targeting 1 unit now, but that's kind of been made up for just by the sheer amount of shots it can unleash. 120 points for the model gives you 6 super shooters, a DAKKA 6-4, strength 6, AP-1 and damage 1, so should usually be stacking 12 of those hits on the enemy, which isn't bad given its movement and relative cheap cost. You could potentially give it the more DAKKA custom job upgrade. You need to try and roll a 4+ for that each time it fires, and if you get a 4+, then each DAKKA weapon gets an extra shot, and on a 6 each DAKKA weapon gets an extra 2 shots. Overall it maths out to an average of 4 extra shots per shooting phase, which I think usually won't quite be worth it for 15 points. I'd rather put that extra 15 points towards another DAKKA jet, if that was an option. In general, DAKKA jets are going to really love speed war, they get an extra 6 shots out of it, and their guns go to AP-2, so they're just going to be super devastating on that turn. They could fly next to a Warspbomb blaster jet for an invul save, and they will most certainly love the freebooters buff if you can get it. Theoretically, in speed war with the freebooters buff active, you're going to be averaging a pretty crazy 21 strength 6 AP-2 hits. Not bad on such a cheap plane, that should be able to get line of sight on what it wants to. Overall though, for an unbuffed DAKKA jet, you'll kill around about 8 guardsmen, 2 intercessors or 2 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. Very good against light infantry, somewhat good against heavies, and bad against tanks. And against most targets you're going to get around about 50% damage increase in the first turn of speed war. Overall I'd really not say it's too bad, given the premium that you usually have to pay for flyers and their extra mobility. I'm going to leave the burner bomber and the blitzer bomber for this video, seeing as their bombs work a bit differently to standard shooting, but I thought we would mention the Warspomb blaster jet, the other end of the Ork flyer spectrum, being very expensive even for a basic entry one. I think I'd be quite tempted to take the 210 point version with 2 teleport blasters and 2 super shooters. The plane gets a 4+ ballistic skill for being a mech, and those teleport blasters really are very scary indeed. 24-inch weapons with assault D6, strength 9, AP-2, and a big damage D3+3. There aren't really very many things in the game that could potentially spit out up to 12 shots with that sort of profile. It also has an onboard smasher gun and a stick bomb flinger too, and if you're feeling particularly spendy, you could upgrade to the force field to protect itself and other nearby planes with a 5+ invul. Finally, you can also tag on a couple of super shooters as well. An extra 12 shots at ballistic skill 4+ for just 20 points seems kind of worth it to me. The damage output on the plane is really quite impressive, with those super shooters and the teleport blaster. It should kill around about 9 guardsmen, 4 intercessors, or 11 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. Definitely not a threat your opponent can ignore. It's a bit more tame when you wait for points, but still it is very efficient against heavy vehicles, and it's really not too bad considering the premium that you have to pay for flyer mobility. In general though, it really is still quite fragile for the points cost. If your opponent can get range on this early on, it's going to go down fairly easy. Overall, certainly really threatening, but it does feel like putting a lot of your eggs in one fairly fragile basket. Going back to their heavy support, I thought I'd just touch on the Death Dread with a quad custom Mega Blaster. This one costs 125 points now, and it's still kind of okay at anti-armor, though I think it's not quite as efficient as it used to be with the Death Skull rerolls and the 4+ ballistic skill you could get with the custom job. It still does a kind of okay job of being anti-tank, around about 5 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle per Death Dread, and can be okay against squads due to those guns having the blast keyword. Interestingly though, I think the Games Workshop left a probably unintentional custom job open to this. You can take an extra custom weapon on the mech custom jobs list, and that gives you 1 extra shot for every custom Mega Blaster fired. I strongly suspect that that's only supposed to be limited to mechs, but I can't see anything that actually forbids you from taking it on the Death Dread. So until then, if you want to add an extra 50% to your firepower, then that'll only cost 10 points on the Dread. That will get it from being mediocre to really quite efficient anti-tank. though I'd not be surprised if it did get FAQ'd, not necessarily because it's all that powerful, but just because it seems unintentional. I guess they could be interesting in evil sons as well. With having assault weapons, they could always advance and shoot for no penalty, giving it potentially really quite good strike range. Next up, I think we come to one of the bigger losers of the heavy support in the gun wagon. This thing's a really tough transport, though it doesn't get open topped so you can't fire out of it, but its firepower just really isn't good compared with the other options, unfortunately. If you upgrade to its unique custom job Daboomer for a 2d6 shot kill cannon with strength 8, AP-2 and damage 2, you're still only killing around about 3 guardsmen, 2 intercessors or 3 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle, and it just really isn't at all impressive for an 190 point model. I guess with toughness 8 and a 3+ save and a transport capacity, it could be a bit more of a mixed role unit, delivering one of your units into battle, but otherwise just as a unit on its own, it really seems quite underwhelming. It's not really going to achieve all that much firepower wise. Finally, we're moving on to fast attack, and I thought we'd start with a comparison of a few of the different October buggies, all of which went down in points, and a few got slightly boosted profiles as well, even if a few lost their custom jobs. The Shock Jump Dragster is now only 85 points. It gets a rocket launcher and a shock rifle with Assault 2, 24 inches, Strength 8 and AP-3, and a big D6 damage. With the Grot Gunner and Targeting Squig, it also hits on a princely 3+, but only with the shock rifle. For the points, it's kind of middling to OK, anti-medium infantry and anti-tank, though if you do use its signature move with the shock tunnel, it does take a decent amount of mortal wounds, and you won't be able to fire the rocket launcher as it's no longer an assault weapon. Seems okay for a bit of fast and flexible anti-tank, can do a bit of melee, and can maybe pull its jump around the battlefield trick if it makes the difference of scoring an objective or something. The Boom DAKKA Snaz Wagon is 90 points. That thing gets a big shooter, burner bottles, and its mech special, which is a 30-inch DAKKA 1410 weapon at strength 5, AP-2 and damage 2. For 10 points you can take a souped up special, which makes it 16 and 12, so only 2 shots and really not worth it for the cost. At range it is a fairly generalist profile. It'll kill around about 4 guardsmen, 2 or 3 space marines, and 2 or 3 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle, so generally best at anti-marine, and will be a little bit better against hordes if you can get up close in range of those burner bottles. Maybe a little bit harder to deal with at range as well, as you got a built-in -1 to hit that it always gets. Next we have the Custom Booster Blaster. That's the one that gets the Rivet Cannon, 36 inches, DAKKA 9.6, strength 7, AP-2 and damage 2. That's okay and everything, but the real standout thing is its 4 burner exhausts, essentially 4 standard flamers that it gets at 8-inch range. The damage really is quite poor outside of the burner exhaust range, but if you can get up close and personal, just one of these very cheap vehicles should roast an entire squad of guardsmen, 2 or 3 intercessors, or do around 3 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. That really is quite solid damage output there, but of course you have to get up far closer than the other buggies, and aside from a spiked ram, it doesn't have any special attacks in combat. Seems like quite a fun and fairly expendable anti-infantry killing machine. Finally, before we get onto the Squig buggy, we have the Megatrack Scrapjet, 90 points and comes with a 24-inch 3d3 rocket cannon, a strength 8, AP-2 and damage 3, gets an extra attack with its wing missiles at the same profile, and then also gets 2 twin big shooters as well, which is quite impressive, chasing that down with a big 20 shots at 18-inch range. It seems like quite a good generalist pick to me. Should kill around 5 guardsmen, 2 or 3 marines, and do 3 or 4 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. And I think it might be one of the better picks out of the buggies in general, as it's got good all-round damage output at reasonable range, plus has fairly good melee with its strength 8 nose drill and also the spiked ram for the mortal wound chance. A little bit more expensive than some of them, but does seem like a good all-rounder. Finally, we come to the Rocket Truck Squig buggy, which I have made an entire video on if you would fancy going and searching that, and this is the one that unexpectedly became quite decent Ork artillery in the new Codex, allowing you to rain down squigs from the sky. The heavy squig launcher has actually got quite decent damage output too, 36 inches, 2d6 shots, a strength 5 AP-2 and damage 2, ignores line of sight and hits on 4s with its Grot Gunner. There's then an 18-inch range standard squig launcher, though that's only d6 shots and fired by an Ork, so not as accurate, and gets a shotgun and some saw blades in melee, so it's quite nice to know that it's not entirely worthless there either. You can get a -1 to hit on it with the Speed Freak stratagem, the same as the other buggies, and there is a 25-point custom job for Nitro Squigs, which give both of those squig launchers +1 to wound. That would allow it a little bit more anti-armor capability. Though again, for the cost, I'd be very tempted just to take more squig buggies, as the nitro squigs don't give you any more durability or any more melee. Considering it ignores line of sight, its damage output is really good. 3 to 4 dead guardsmen, 2 dead intercessors, or around 2 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. And with line of sight blocking terrain being all important in 9th edition, it'd be pretty handy to have a few of these around just raining down some squigs on an enemy unit that you can't quite reach. It's not too bad against either light or heavy infantry. Next up we come to the Warbikers, which again, as I covered in a previous video, they're certainly one of the shooting units that can make some of the scariest numbers happen. They got drastically buffed in their Codex, going down to 25 points per model. Their DAKKA guns became a big 10-6 weapon, still at strength 5, AP 0 and damage 1, plus they're okay in melee, and really quite tough at range, with 3 toughness 5 wounds and a -1 to hit. They're just pretty efficient all round really. They're perhaps one of the units that makes most benefit of bad moons, really appreciating the extra range, the extra AP that they get, and the 1 command point stratagem to massively boost their firepower. They're also one of the units that gets on best with speed war as well. Again, extra AP and extra DAKKA shots is going to really leave a mark. If you look at a maxed out unit of 9 that are within 9 inches, or have paid the 2 CP for more DAKKA, just at base you'll kill around 13 dead guardsmen, 2 or 3 intercessors, or 2 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. Not enormously impressive for the points, but say if you were in speed war and had access to the bad moon stratagem for 1 CP, then with that unit with its 108 strength 5 AP -1 shots, it's going to be mowing down around about 30 guardsmen, 9 2 wound space marines, or 10 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. On the turn where their stars align, they're just going to be an anti-everything shooting unit for a turn. Per 100 points their base stats aren't amazingly impressive, they're only really any good against light infantry, but definitely a unit that you could build around. Finally, last but not least, we come to the Death Copters, 50 points per model, attacking with their copter rockets with 2d3, strength 8, AP -2 and damage 3 shots. One of their biggest advantages is having built-in deep strike, so they can be some guaranteed rocket shots on the target before making a near guaranteed charge into combat with ramming speed, where they also get a whole bunch of strength 5 melee, so they're definitely more of a mixed role unit than just pure shooting. They aren't core though, which does lock them out of a few stratagems. Otherwise you could upgrade them to boom boys for an extra bit of AP, or fly boys for some cover at range, and like most orc vehicles on the list, they will benefit from being freebooters or getting speed war. For 3 of them for 150 points, they're not going to do all that much to infantry, 3 dead guardsmen or around 2 dead intercessors, or around about 5 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. To be honest, for a pure firepower unit they just really aren't all that efficient. I think they're most certainly a unit that you both have to get value out of their firepower, and then also out of their spinning blades in combat. Between that though and their free deep strike, they're really not too bad though, I think. So finally, if we put it all together and just see a few of the more efficient shooting sources for 100 points, for killing guardsmen, in general it tends to be the flamers up close that will be the most efficient. If you can get a custom booster blaster within 18-inch range, that's one of the most efficient picks, same with burners at 12-inch. Otherwise, for things with some actual range, we've got the DAKKA jet for 7 dead, or the Warbikers for 6 dead, though of course the Warbikers can get significantly better when they're buffed. Otherwise the Megatrack Scrapjet, Shooter Boys and Flash Kits are all kind of okay. Flash Kits very so if you use their 2 command point stratagem, and Looters aren't bad either. For killing 2 wound Space Marines, most choices don't tend to be absolutely stand out to be honest. A lot of things float in around about 2 or 3 dead Marines for around about 100 points invested. The custom Mega Cannons seem like a good pick with 3 dead for the 100 points, and burners if you get them up close. Otherwise though, technically Flash Kits could be the most efficient if you use their 2 command point stratagem. You are in theory killing 5 there, and most of the buggies, the looters and the tank busters also do a decent job. Finally, for killing vehicles, if you can manage to get tank busters stationary, then they do the best, stacking around about 8 wounds on a toughness 7 vehicle, though they're followed up really quite closely by the custom Mega Cannon mech guns, who will do very near as much and at much longer range and with better toughness. Otherwise, with custom Mega Blasters, the burners are still decent, so's the Water Spawn Blaster Jet, and Flash Kits if you use their stratagem. Maybe a little bit underrepresented on the list, I think, are the Rocket-Rock Squig Buggies, massively more useful for the ignores line of sight, Warbikers because of their crazy synergy they can do, and while Looters don't really excel in any one category, they are really quite general purpose. Overall for Orky shooting, I think maybe mech guns are still one of my favourite units, though I think it is a touch restrictive that you're usually just going to want to run them in single model units. It means that maybe 2 or 3 of them in spare heavy support slots are quite good, but more than that and you might get them running away. Otherwise, I'd say quite a lot of the other options seem kind of balanced. Burners are really quite efficient, but you need some more investment to get a slow and fairly fragile unit up close. Flash kits are really solid against killing a lot of things, but you have to pay 2 CP for their stratagem to make them so, and warbikers can be spectacular, but again aren't going to be doing that all game long. Maybe overall my favourite top 4 might be mech guns, the rush truck squig buggy, the DAKKA jet and the Megatrack scrap jet, if you take into account their other benefits. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. What's your favourite orc firepower in the new codex, and which ones are you looking forward to trying out in your armies? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep some orc related content coming. Certainly looking forward to doing a few more reviews of the new decks. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the content on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find it down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next for the channel, and automatic entry to the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.